You think a pact signed in blood can force me to my knees? Queen Vela Thorne's voice cut through the silence of her war room like a blade through flesh. 7 years she'd held this god-forsaken frontier alone. 7 years of survival, of enemies at every border, of proving she was more than her father's legacy. And now this, a northern king storming into her court with a marriage contract she never agreed to, claiming her like property. The room held its breath. Darian Vare's eyes locked onto hers, dark and unreadable. I don't need you on your knees, Vela. I need you alive. And if you refuse me, you won't be either for long. Something in his voice made her pulse quicken. Not fear, something far more dangerous. This was the beginning of everything falling apart. If you want to see how a queen who bows to no one faces the choice between power and something she never thought she'd need, stay until the end. Drop a comment with your city and let me know if you'd fight or surrender. And don't forget to hit that like button. Bessie. The first mistake anyone made about Vela Thorne was thinking she'd break. The second was thinking she wouldn't kill you for trying. She stood at the window of her keep, watching the northern delegation carve through the snow toward her gates. 20 riders, maybe 30, all bearing the silver wolf standard of House Vare, all coming to collect on a debt she didn't owe. You could refuse to see him, Ronan said from behind her. Vela didn't turn. And have him think I'm afraid? No. Are you afraid? Now she looked at him. Ronan Hale had been her beta for 5 years, her friend for longer. Tall, steady, with eyes that saw too much and said too little. He'd been there the night her father died, the night she took the throne at 19 with blood still wet on her hands. He'd never questioned her, never doubted. I'm not afraid of anything that bleeds, she said. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. Good, because that's an alpha who doesn't know how to lose. She'd heard the stories. Darian Vare, the Winter Wolf, the man who'd united the fractured northern clans through conquest and cunning. Ruthless, strategic, undefeated, and apparently convinced he had a claim to her hand because her father had been desperate and stupid. The doors to her hall burst open an hour later. No announcement, no courtesy. Just boots on stone and the smell of winter wind. Viola sat on her throne, not ornate, not comfortable, just functional like everything else in this fortress, and watched Darian Vare walk toward her like he owned the room. He was bigger than she'd expected. Not just tall, but broad, built like a man who'd spent his life in armor. Dark hair pulled back, sharp features, and eyes the color of storm clouds. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. Until now. Queen Vela. His voice was deep, controlled. I've come to honor the pact between our houses. There is no pact, she said flatly. He stopped 5 feet from the throne. Close enough to be a challenge. Your father signed... My father signed a lot of things before he died, most of them worthless. She leaned forward slightly. I don't honor debts made by dead men. The hall went silent. Her counsel shifted nervously behind her. Ronan's hand drifted toward his weapon. Darian's expression didn't change. The pact was witnessed by 3 kings and sealed in blood. Your father offered your hand in exchange for military support during the Eastern Rebellion. We provided that support. 2,000 men, 700 of them didn't come home. And I'm supposed to pay for that with my freedom? You're supposed to pay for that with honor, she laughed. Actually laughed. Honor? You want to talk about honor? You who carved through the northern territories like a butcher? Who burned out the Frost clans and scattered the Ironwood families? Don't lecture me about honor, Vare. Something flickered in his eyes. Anger, maybe, or respect. Hard to tell. Those clans needed unifying, he said. The North was chaos. I brought order. You brought blood. So did you. He gestured vaguely toward the walls. Or do you think I haven't heard the stories? The Thorn Queen who held the frontier against 4 separate invasions? Who executed her own uncle for treason? Who burned the trade ships of the river lords when they tried to embargo your grain? Those were necessary. So was unifying the North. He took a step closer. You and I aren't so different, Vela. We both do what's required. We both survive. That's why this pact makes sense. Nothing about this makes sense, she shot back. You don't need a wife. You need territory, and I'm not giving you mine. I don't want your territory. I want... Me? Yes, I heard you the first time. She stood, descending the steps until they were level. Her counsel tensed. Ronan moved closer. But here's what you don't understand, King Darian. I've held this land for 7 years without help, without alliances, without bending to men who think power gives them permission. I won't start now. They were close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his gray eyes, could feel the heat coming off him despite the cold stone room. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. I've made plenty. I'm still here. For a long moment, neither moved. The air felt charged, like before a lightning strike. Then Darian smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. I'm not leaving, Vela. Your father's pact was legitimate. I have the documents, the witnesses, the seals. I came here as a courtesy, to introduce myself before the wedding. But whether you cooperate or not, this marriage will happen. Get out. No! The room erupted. Her guards moved forward. His men responded. Steel sang as blades cleared sheaths. Enough! Vela's voice cracked like a whip. Everyone froze. She didn't take her eyes off Darian. You want to stay? Fine. Stay. Take chambers. Attend councils. Play whatever game you think you're playing. But understand this. She stepped even closer, close enough that their breath mingled in the cold air. I will never marry you. Not for honor, not for politics, not for anything. So if you're waiting for me to break, you'll be waiting a long time. I'm patient. I'm not. He held her gaze for 3 more seconds. Then, impossibly, he laughed. A real laugh, deep and genuine. This is going to be interesting. He turned and walked out, his men falling in behind him. The doors closed. The hall remained frozen. Ronan appeared at her elbow. That went well. Shut up. He's not leaving. I noticed. Vela, Ronan's voice dropped. If the pact is legitimate, I don't care if it's written in gold and signed by every king from here to the coast. I'm not marrying him. She climbed back to her throne and sat down heavily. Call the council, tonight. I want to see those documents myself. And if they're real, she looked at him, then I'll find another way. The documents were real. Vela stared at them spread across the table in her private study, her father's seal. 3 witness marks. A clause that promised Darian Vare her hand in marriage in exchange for military aid against the Eastern Rebellion 7 years ago. She remembered that rebellion. Remembered the desperation. They'd been outnumbered 3-1, supplies cut off, winter closing in. Her father had been frantic, sending ravens to every ally he had. Apparently he'd sent one too many. The pact is binding, Counselor Marsh said carefully. He was old, cautious, the kind of man who valued law over sense. Your father had the authority to make it. You were 16 at the time. I was 16, Vela repeated. A child. Old enough to be betrothed by our laws. Old enough to be sold, you mean? Marsh flinched, but didn't argue. Ronan paced by the window. What about the clause requiring mutual consent? There is no such clause, Marsh said. Then we add one. We challenge the pact's legitimacy based on what? Vela cut in. Based on me not wanting it? That's not grounds for breaking a sealed contract. Believe me, I've looked. She'd spent 3 hours going through every legal text she had. Nothing. The pact was airtight. So what do we do? Ronan stopped pacing, looked at her directly. We survive, she said. Same as always. But the problem was, Darian Vare wasn't like other problems. Other problems she could outthink or outlast. She could fortify, strategize, wait them out. But Darian had embedded himself in her court like a splinter under skin, painful, persistent, impossible to ignore. He attended every council meeting, not as an observer, but as a participant. He questioned her decisions, challenged her strategies, offered alternatives that were infuriatingly often better than hers. You're fortifying the Eastern Pass, he said one morning, leaning over the map table. Why? Because that's where the last 3 attacks came from, Vela replied coolly. Exactly. They've tested that pass 3 times. They know your defenses now. They'll come from the south. The southern road is twice as long and goes through hostile territory, which is why they won't expect you to defend it. He tapped the map. Pull half your forces from the east, reinforce the southern garrison. Leave the eastern pass looking vulnerable. When they commit to the attack, you'll have the advantage. She wanted to disagree. Wanted to tell him he was wrong, but he wasn't wrong. I'll consider it, she said stiffly. His smile was infuriating. Of course you will. It got worse. He trained with her soldiers, earning their respect through skill rather than title. He walked the walls with her night watch, learning names, sharing drinks. He even helped the kitchen staff during a supply shortage, hauling grain like a common laborer. He's winning them over, Ronan said one night. They were in her chambers going over reports. The men like him. The men don't decide who I marry. No, but they might decide who they follow if it comes to conflict. Vela threw down her quill. It won't come to conflict. I won't let it. Then what will you do? She didn't have an answer. The truth was, Darien Vare was getting under her skin in ways she couldn't explain. It wasn't just his persistence or his strategic mind. It was the way he looked at her, not like a prize to be won, but like an equal to be challenged. The way he argued with her in council, then backed her decisions in front of the soldiers. The way he pushed her, tested her, made her prove herself over and over. It was exhausting. It was exhilarating. It was dangerous. You're thinking about him. Ronan's voice startled her back to the present. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. I'm thinking about how to get rid of him, she corrected. Are you? She met his eyes. Ronan had been her constant for so long that she sometimes forgot he was more than just a beta, more than just a friend. He was the person who knew her best, who'd seen her at her weakest and never used it against her. I'm not going to marry him, Ronan. I know. But something in his voice sounded hollow. The confrontation came 3 weeks after Darien's arrival. A supply caravan was ambushed on the northern road. 20 soldiers dead, 6 wounded, all the grain stolen. It was a disaster. Worse, it was humiliating. Her roads were supposed to be safe. Vela called an emergency council. Everyone assembled within the hour, including Darien. This was the River Lords, she said without preamble. They're testing our strength again. Or it was bandits, Councillor Wren suggested. The northern road has always been dangerous. Bandits don't take just the grain and leave the weapons, Vela snapped. This was strategic. They wanted to starve us, not rob us. Darien spoke up. Then you need to respond strategically. Send a message. I plan to. What kind of message? He leaned forward. A raiding party? A blockade? Because if you're planning to do what you did last time, burning their trade ships, that's going to start a war you can't win. The room went cold. Excuse me? Vela's voice was deadly quiet. You heard me. The River Lords have 3 times your military strength. You can harass them, you can make them bleed, but you can't beat them in open conflict. Not alone. Then what do you suggest? Her hands were flat on the table, knuckles white. That I do nothing? That I let them attack my people and steal my supplies? I suggest you think longer term. Form alliances, build coalitions. Stop acting like you're the only person in this fight. I am the only person in this fight. No one else defended this land when the raiders came. No one else held the line when the Eastern Kingdoms invaded. I did that. Alone. And you're exhausted, Darien said. Not cruelly, just factually. You're stretched thin, your resources are dwindling, and your enemies know it. You need help, Vela. I don't need anything from you. Then you're a fool. The council gasped. Ronan shot to his feet. You don't speak to her that way. Darien didn't even look at him. I'll speak however I want. I'm not one of her subjects. You're a guest, Ronan said coldly, and guests who disrespect the queen tend to leave early. Is that a threat? It's a fact. Enough, Vela stood. Both of you, out. Everyone out. Now. The council scrambled to leave. Ronan hesitated, but a single look from Vela sent him through the door. Only Darien remained. I told you to leave, Vela said, and I told you I'm not your subject. He stood, walked around the table until only a few feet separated them. You want to hate me? Fine. But at least be honest about why. I don't hate you. I don't think about you enough to hate you. Liar. His voice was soft, almost gentle. You think about me constantly. I see it in the way you watch me during council, The way you tense when I walk into a room, the way you argue with me even when you know I'm right. Your arrogance is astounding. So is yours. He took another step. You've convinced yourself that needing anyone makes you weak, that accepting help is surrender. But strength isn't about standing alone, Vela. It's about knowing when to fight and when to let someone stand beside you. I don't need anyone beside me. Everyone needs someone. Another step. They were close now, too close. Even queens who rule alone. Her heart was hammering. She could feel the heat of him, smell leather and pine and something uniquely him. This was dangerous territory. This was... Get out, she whispered. For a moment she thought he'd refuse, thought he'd push further, cross the line they'd been dancing around for weeks. Then he stepped back. As you wish, Your Majesty. He left. Vela stood alone in the empty council room, breathing hard, hands shaking. What the hell was happening to her? Bad. Ronan found her on the battlements an hour later. She was staring out at the mountains, watching snow clouds gather on the peaks. Winter was coming early this year. That meant harder raids, longer nights, more pressure on supplies. You shouldn't be out here alone, Ronan said. I'm not alone. You're here. He moved to stand beside her. For a while, neither spoke. He's wrong, you know, Ronan finally said, about you needing help. You've done fine on your own. Have I? Vela gestured toward the dark forest. 20 soldiers dead today. How many more before I admit I can't protect everyone? You can't blame yourself for that. I'm the queen. Who else do I blame? Ronan turned to face her. Vela, what are you going to do about him? About Darian? Yes, she sighed. I don't know. The pact is legitimate. If I refuse, he could take it to the High Council, make it a formal dispute. That would tie up resources, maybe even divide my court. Some of them are already sympathetic to him. Then marry him. She looked at Ronan sharply. What? I said marry him, but his expression was pained. If the pact is binding and you can't break it, maybe it's not the worst option. You can't be serious. He's not a bad man, Vela. Ruthless, yes. Arrogant, definitely. But he's competent, strong. He could help you. I don't want his help. But you might need it. Something in Ronan's voice made her pause. He was looking at her with an intensity she'd never seen before, something raw and unguarded. Ronan, I've watched you carry this burden for 7 years, he said quietly. I've watched you sacrifice everything, sleep, safety, any chance at happiness, for this land and these people. And I've never said anything because it wasn't my place. But maybe it's time you let someone share the weight. Someone like Darian? Someone like anyone, even... He stopped, swallowed. Even me. The world tilted. Ronan, Forget it. He stepped back, the shudders coming down over his face. Forget I said anything. I'm just worried about you, that's all. But it wasn't all. She could see it now, plain as daylight. How long had he felt this way? How long had she been blind to it? Ronan, I should check the night watch. He was already walking away. Stay safe, Vela. He disappeared into the shadows, leaving her alone with the wind and the snow and a crushing weight in her chest. She'd built her entire life on being unbreakable, on needing no one, on standing alone against everything the world threw at her. But standing alone was starting to feel less like strength and more like slow suicide. That night she couldn't sleep. She paced her chambers, mind churning. Darian's words kept echoing. Everyone needs someone, even queens who rule alone. Was he right? Was she being stubborn for the sake of pride, or was she protecting something deeper? The part of herself that knew if she started relying on someone else, she'd never be able to stop. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Come in. She expected Ronan, or maybe one of the night guards with a report. It was Darian. He stood in the doorway, still dressed despite the late hour. We need to talk. It's after midnight. I know, but this can't wait. Against her better judgment, she let him in. He crossed to the window, looked out at the dark courtyard below. There's something you need to know, he said. About the pact. Her stomach dropped. What about it? It's not just a marriage contract. He turned to face her. There's a secondary clause. One your father never told you about. What kind of clause? If we marry, our territories merge under joint rule. Equal authority. Your lands, my armies, combined resources. It would create the strongest kingdom in the region. Vela stared at him. Joint rule? My father agreed to that? He was desperate. The Eastern Rebellion was going to destroy you. He needed my help badly enough to offer power sharing. And you accepted. Of course I accepted. It's a good deal. He paused. For both of us. You're insane if you think I'd share power with you. Why? Because you don't trust me? Because I don't trust anyone. Not even Ronan? The question hit like a blade. She looked away. That's different. Is it? Darian moved closer. I've seen how you are with him. He's loyal, devoted, maybe even in love with you. That's none of your business. It is if it affects this marriage. He was right in front of her now. I need to know, Vela. Is there something between you two? No. Are you sure? Yes. But even as she said it, she thought about Ronan's words on the battlements, the pain in his eyes. He's my beta, my friend, that's all. Does he know that? She didn't answer. Darian studied her face. You're going to have to choose, sooner or later, him or me, friendship or power, the past or the future. I don't have to choose anything. Yes, you do. Because this pact isn't going away. And I'm not leaving. So you can keep fighting me, keep pretending you don't feel this, he gestured between them. Or you can accept reality. What reality? That we're matched, Vela. Strength for strength, will for will. You hate it because you've never met anyone who challenges you the way I do, who sees through your armor to the person underneath, who isn't intimidated by your power. You're not intimidated because you're arrogant. Maybe. Or maybe I just recognize what you refuse to admit, that you're tired of standing alone, that some part of you wants this. You don't know what I want. Don't I? His hand came up, fingers brushing her jaw. The touch was electric. Tell me you feel nothing when I walk into a room. Tell me you don't think about what it would be like to have someone at your side who's your equal, someone who could share the burden instead of just following orders. Her breath caught. She should pull away, should put distance between them. She didn't move. This is manipulation, she whispered. No, this is truth. His thumb traced her cheekbone. And you're terrified of it. I'm not terrified of anything. Liar. But he said it gently, almost tenderly. You're the bravest person I've ever met, Vela. Brave enough to hold a kingdom together through sheer force of will. Brave enough to stand against enemies who should have destroyed you. But you're afraid of this, of letting someone in. Because letting someone in means giving them power to hurt me. Yes, it does. His forehead dropped to rest against hers. But it also means you don't have to hurt alone. For one suspended moment, the world narrowed to just this, the warmth of his breath, the strength in his hands, the pull between them that felt ancient and inevitable and terrifying. Then reality crashed back. Vela stepped away. Get out. Vela. I said get out. Her voice shook. This conversation is over. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. As you wish. He left. Vela stood frozen in the middle of her chambers, heart racing, mind reeling. What the hell had just happened, and why did she already regret sending him away? The next morning brought news that made everything worse. A rider arrived at dawn, half frozen and bleeding from a gash across his ribs. He collapsed in the courtyard before anyone could catch him. By the time Vela reached him, he was barely conscious. The southern garrison, he gasped. Attacked 3 days ago. Her blood went cold. How many? All of them. 200 soldiers, gone. The world tilted. She'd had men stationed there, good men, loyal men. The southern route was supposed to be secondary, a backup in case the eastern pass fell. She'd left them with minimal supplies because resources were tight, and the eastern front needed. Darian had told her to reinforce the south. She'd ignored him. Get the physician, she ordered. 2 guards carried the rider inside. Vela stood in the courtyard, snow falling around her, rage and guilt warring in her chest. Ronan appeared at her side. Vela. Don't. She couldn't look at him. Just don't. This isn't your fault. 200 men are dead because I was too stubborn to listen. She turned and walked toward the great hall. Call the council, now. They assembled within the hour. Every face around the table looked grim. Darian stood by the window, arms crossed, saying nothing. The southern garrison was destroyed 3 days ago, Vela said without preamble. The river lords committed 800 soldiers to the attack. They burned the fort, took the supplies, and left no survivors except the messenger. 800? Councillor Marsh looked pale. That's a full military campaign. Yes. Then this is war. This has always been war, Vela snapped. We've just been pretending otherwise. She looked around the table. I want proposals. How do we respond? Silence. No one wanted to be the first to speak. Finally, Darian pushed off from the window. You can't respond. Not directly. I can, and I will. With what army? His voice was calm, factual. You have maybe 800 soldiers across all your territories. The river lords have 3,000 plus mercenaries. If you engage them in open conflict, you lose. Then what do you suggest? That I do nothing while they burn my garrisons and kill my people? I suggest you stop thinking like a queen defending her borders and start thinking like a survivor fighting for her life. He moved to the map table, traced the river routes with one finger. The river lords are overextended. They're holding territory from here to the delta. That takes manpower, resources, constant vigilance. You can't beat them in a straight fight, but you can bleed them. We've been bleeding them for years. It hasn't worked. Because you've been doing it alone. He looked up at her. But if you had allies, real allies, not just trade partners, you could coordinate attacks, hit multiple points simultaneously, force them to spread their forces thin. I don't have allies. You could. His eyes held hers. If you married me. The room erupted. Half the council started talking at once. Ronan slammed his hand on the table. Enough! This isn't about your damn marriage contract. Isn't it? Darian's voice cut through the noise. Your queen is isolated, vulnerable. Her enemies know it. They're testing her defenses, probing for weakness. How long before they realize she can't defend everything at once? How long before they commit to a real invasion? We've held them off before. Barely, and each time costs more. He turned back to Vela. I have 5,000 soldiers, access to northern supply routes, allies in 3 kingdoms. Marry me, and all of that becomes yours. At what cost? Shared power, shared decisions, shared risk. He paused. And you stop carrying everything alone. She wanted to throw something at him. Wanted to scream that she didn't need his help, didn't need anyone's help, that she'd held this land through worse, and she'd hold it through this. But 200 men were dead, and she couldn't afford pride anymore. I need to think, she said. We don't have time. I said I need to think. Her voice cracked like a whip. Council dismissed. Everyone out except Ronan. They filed out slowly. Darian lingered by the door, his expression unreadable. Then he left too. Ronan waited until they were alone. You're actually considering it. What choice do I have? You always have a choice. Do I? She gestured at the map. The river lords aren't going to stop. They'll keep pushing until I break or bend. And if I break, everyone under my rule suffers. So tell me, Ronan, what's my choice here? He crossed to her, took her shoulders gently. You don't have to marry him. There are other ways. Name one. We could reach out to the coastal kingdoms, form a coalition, which would take months to negotiate and might not even work. We don't have months. Then we fortify what we have, pull back, consolidate, and abandon half my territory? Watch my people get slaughtered because I wasn't strong enough to protect them? She pulled away. That's not an option. Then what is? She didn't answer, because the only option that made strategic sense was the one thing she'd sworn never to do, give up control. Ronan's hands dropped. You're going to marry him. I don't know. Yes, you do. I can see it in your face. His voice went flat. You've already decided. Ronan, it's fine, but his eyes said otherwise. You're doing what you have to do. I understand. Do you? He looked at her for a long moment. No, but I'll stand by you anyway. That's what I do. He left before she could respond. Vela stood alone in the council room, surrounded by maps of territories she couldn't defend and supply lines she couldn't protect, and felt the weight of 7 years pressing down on her shoulders. Maybe Darian was right. Maybe she was exhausted. Maybe she was finally breaking. She found Darian in the training yard that afternoon, working through sword forms with brutal efficiency. He moved like violence given purpose, each strike precise, controlled, lethal. He saw her watching and stopped. Come to give me an answer? Come to ask a question. He sheathed his sword. Ask. If we do this, if I agree to the marriage, what happens to my authority? Nothing. Joint rule means equal power. But you have more resources, more soldiers, more influence. How long before equal becomes yours? He stepped closer. Is that what you think I want? To absorb your territory and reduce you to a figurehead? Isn't it? No. His voice was steady. I want a partner, Vela. Someone who can match me, challenge me, keep me honest. I have plenty of advisors who tell me what I want to hear. I don't need another one. Then what do you need? Someone who'll tell me when I'm wrong. Someone who understands what it costs to hold power. Someone who... He stopped, jaw tightening. Someone like you. The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. She'd expected manipulation, political maneuvering, not this. Why me? She asked quietly. You could have married any number of queens or nobles. Why honor a pact my father made when he was desperate? Because I saw you fight at the Battle of Crow's Ridge. She blinked. What? 5 years ago, the Eastern Rebellion. I was there with my forces. I watched you hold a defensive line with 300 soldiers against 1,500. You were 21 years old, and you fought like you were carved from stone. No fear, no hesitation, just absolute terrifying competence. He smiled slightly. I've met a lot of rulers, Vela. Most of them inherited power and have no idea what to do with it. But you? You earned yours, every bloody inch of it. Something in her chest loosened. Just a fraction. That doesn't mean we're compatible, she said. No, but it means we have a chance. He held out his hand. Fight me. She stared at him. What? You want to know if I'll try to dominate you? If I'll use my strength to override your decisions? Then fight me. See what happens when we're evenly matched. It was insane, and exactly what she needed. She took his hand, let him pull her into the training ring. Someone brought her a practice sword. It was lighter than her usual blade, but balanced well enough. Darian took position opposite her, sword held loosely. Rules? She asked. No rules. First to yield. I don't yield. Neither do I. This should be interesting. They circled each other. Vela watched his footwork, his grip, the way he held his weight. He was bigger, stronger, with longer reach. She'd have to be faster. He struck first, a testing blow, meant to gauge her defense. She parried easily, stepped inside his guard, aimed for his ribs. He twisted away, countered with a strike that would have taken her head off if the blade were real. They separated, circled again. You're fast, he said. You're predictable. He laughed. Am I? The next exchange was brutal. He came at her with controlled aggression, each strike flowing into the next. She gave ground, deflecting rather than blocking, waiting for an opening. There. He overcommitted on a downward slash. She ducked under it, swept his legs. He went down hard but rolled and came up swinging. His blade caught her shoulder. Not enough to stop her, but enough to sting. They were both breathing hard now. Lucky hit, she said. Was it? They clashed again. This time neither held back. Steel rang against steel. She felt the impact in her bones, felt her muscles burn with the effort of matching his strength. He was good. Better than good. But she'd been fighting for her life since she was 16, and desperation made you sharp. She feinted left, went right, caught him across the ribs. He grunted, but didn't slow. His next strike came fast enough that she barely got her blade up in time. The force drove her back 3 steps. Yield, he said. No. You're bleeding. She glanced down. Blood seeped through her sleeve where he'd caught her earlier. She hadn't even felt it. So are you. He looked down at his own wound. Just a scratch, but bleeding freely. He smiled. So I am. They fought for another 5 minutes. neither yielding, neither slowing. The yard had gathered a crowd, soldiers watching in silence, some placing bets. Finally, Vela saw her opening. He overextended on a thrust, and she caught his wrist, twisted, used his own momentum to throw him off balance. Her blade came to rest against his throat. "Yield," she said. He looked up at her, chest heaving, eyes bright. "No. I have a blade at your throat, and I have one at your stomach." She looked down. He'd managed to get his blade up between them, point resting against her abdomen. If they'd been using real swords, they'd both be dead. "Draw," he said. "I don't accept draws." "Neither do I. So what do we do?" They stared at each other. Then, impossibly, they both started laughing. The tension broke like a snapped wire. Viola stepped back, lowering her sword. Darian climbed to his feet. "You're good," he admitted. "So are you." "Think we could do this for real? The partnership, I mean, not trying to kill each other." She looked at him, really looked, saw past the arrogance and the politics to the man underneath, saw someone who'd fought as hard as she had to hold power, who understood the cost, who wouldn't break under pressure. "Maybe," she said. His smile was genuine. "That's not a no. It's not a yes either." "I'll take it." They walked back toward the keep together, blood dripping from minor wounds, the crowd partying around them. Vela caught Ronan watching from the battlements. Even from a distance, she could see the tension in his posture, the way his hands gripped the stone. Something twisted in her gut. Guilt, maybe, or recognition of something she'd been refusing to see. That night, Ronan came to her chambers. "We need to talk," he said. "About what?" "About the fact that you're making decisions based on what that northern bastard thinks, instead of what's actually right." She turned from the window. "Excuse me?" "The southern garrison. You're blaming yourself because you didn't follow his advice. But maybe his advice was wrong. Maybe there was no way to predict. 200 men died, Ronan. Men I swore to protect. And you've protected thousands more. You can't save everyone." "I could have saved them. By doing what Darian told you?" His voice rose. "By letting him make your decisions? That's what this marriage is, Vela. Him taking control while calling it partnership. You don't know that. I know men like him. They talk about equality until they have power. Then it's all about their vision, their strategy, their way." He crossed to her. "You've held this land alone for 7 years. You don't need him." "Maybe I do." The words hung between them. Ronan's expression shuddered. What happened to the woman who said she'd never bend? Who swore she'd hold this land without help? She lost 200 soldiers and realized pride doesn't feed people or defend borders. "So that's it? You're just giving up?" "I'm surviving. There's a difference." "Is there?" His voice dropped. "Or are you just tired of fighting alone?" "Maybe I am." She met his eyes. "Would that be so terrible? If it means losing yourself?" "Yes." "I'm not losing myself." "Aren't you?" He gestured toward the window, toward the training yard below. "I watched you fight him today. Watched you laugh with him. You're different around him, Vela. Softer, more willing to compromise." "And that's bad?" "It is if it means you're not the woman I—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "The woman who inspired loyalty through strength." "The woman you what, Ronan?" Silence, heavy and suffocating. "Nothing," he finally said. "Forget it." "No. Say it." "Why? So you can tell me what I already know, that I'm your beta and your friend, and that's all I'll ever be?" His voice cracked. "I've stood beside you for 7 years, Vela. I've fought for you, bled for you. I would die for you without hesitation. And you're going to marry a man who showed up 6 weeks ago because he has more soldiers? It's not about soldiers. Then what is it about?" She didn't have an answer, or maybe she did, and couldn't say it, because the truth was complicated and messy, and admitting it felt like stepping off a cliff. "I'm trying to save lives," she said instead, "by sacrificing your own. If that's what it takes." Ronan looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the handle. "I love you," he said without turning around. "I have for years, and I know it doesn't matter because I'm not a king, and I can't offer you armies or alliances or anything except loyalty. But I needed you to know. Before you make a choice you can't undo." He left. Vela stood frozen, his words echoing in the silence. She'd known. On some level, she'd always known. But hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that denial couldn't fix. Ronan loved her. And she didn't know what she felt. Respect, trust, deep affection. But love, the kind that made you rearrange your entire life? She'd never let herself think about it. Never let herself want anything except survival. Now Darian was offering partnership and power, and Ronan was offering his heart, and she was standing in the middle trying to figure out which would destroy her faster. A knock interrupted her thoughts. "I'm not receiving visitors," she called. The door opened anyway. Darian walked in like he owned the place. I heard what you said." He closed the door behind him. "I also heard Ronan leave. Sounded like that went well. Get out." "In a minute." He crossed to the window, looked out at the dark courtyard. "He's in love with you, in case you somehow missed that." "I didn't miss it." And it's none of your business." "It is if it affects your judgment." He turned to face her. "Are you in love with him?" "That's a simple question. Are you?" She wanted to tell him to go to hell, wanted to throw him out bodily and lock the door. "No," she said instead. "I'm not." "Does he know that?" "He does now." Darian nodded slowly. "That's going to be a problem." "Why?" "Because a man who loves you and can't have you is dangerous, especially one with access to your defenses and your schedule and your trust. Ronan would never hurt you. Maybe not intentionally, but people do desperate things when they're desperate." He moved closer. "I'm not saying he's a threat. I'm saying you need to be aware that his judgment might be compromised." "Like yours?" "I don't love you, Vela." His voice was matter of fact. "I respect you. I want you. I think we could build something powerful together. But love? That requires vulnerability I'm not capable of. So no, my judgment isn't compromised. It's perfectly clear." She didn't know whether to be insulted or relieved. "Then why push so hard for this marriage?" she asked. "Because it makes strategic sense. Because I don't want to spend the rest of my life fighting against you when we could be fighting together. Because—" He hesitated. "Because I'm tired too. Of holding everything alone, of being the winter wolf who conquers and controls and never lets anyone close enough to matter." The honesty surprised her. Again. "You're not what I expected," she admitted. "Neither are you." He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was gentle, almost tender. "I expected the Thorn Queen, cold, ruthless, untouchable. But you're not untouchable, are you? You just pretend to be because it's easier than admitting you're human. Being human gets you killed out here. Maybe. Or maybe it's the only thing that keeps you alive." His hand lingered against her cheek. She should pull away. Should maintain distance, keep the boundaries clear. She leaned into the touch instead. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "How to let someone in without losing myself." "You don't have to know. We figure it out together. And if we can't, then we fail. But at least we fail trying." His thumb brushed her jaw. "I'm not asking you to surrender, Vela. I'm asking you to stand beside me instead of against me. There's a difference." She looked up at him, saw the same exhaustion she felt reflected in his eyes, the same bone-deep weariness of holding power alone, the same desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, it didn't have to be that way forever. "One condition," she said, "name it. If I agree to this marriage, if we do joint rule, my word carries equal weight. No overruling me in front of the council. No undermining my authority. We disagree, we work it out in private. But publicly, we're united." "Agreed. And if you ever try to take control, if you ever make me feel like I'm a figurehead instead of a partner, I will end you. Pact or no pact, marriage or no marriage. Understood?" He smiled. "Perfectly." "Then—" She took a breath, let it out slowly. "Then, yes, I'll marry you." The words felt like jumping off a cliff. His expression shifted, satisfaction mixed with something deeper. Relief, maybe. or recognition that they'd both just crossed a line they couldn't uncross. "When?" he asked. "A month. I need time to prepare my people, finalize the power-sharing agreements, make sure this doesn't fall apart the moment we sign the papers." "A month," he nodded. "I can work with that." They stood close enough that she could feel his warmth, smell leather and snow, and something uniquely him, close enough that kissing him would take nothing more than a slight shift forward. She didn't move. Neither did he. "This is a mistake," she said, but she didn't sound convinced. "Probably." He stepped back, giving her space. "But it's our mistake. That's got to count for something." He left, and she was alone again. Vela walked to the window, looked out at her land, harsh, unforgiving, beautiful in its brutality. She'd defended it for 7 years, bled for it, nearly died for it more times than she could count. Now she was betting everything on a partnership with a man she barely knew. Either she was desperate or insane, possibly both. The announcement came 2 days later. Vela stood before her assembled court and soldiers, Darian at her side, and spoke the words that would change everything. "The marriage pact between House Thorn and House Veyr will be honored. 1 month from today, King Darian and I will wed. Our territories will merge under joint rule with equal authority. Any threats to one become threats to both." The reaction was mixed. Some cheered, mostly the younger soldiers who saw tactical advantage in the alliance. Some looked uncertain, and some, she saw it in their faces, looked betrayed. Ronan stood at the back of the hall, expression blank. After the announcement, people swarmed her with questions. She answered mechanically, maintaining composure while inside she felt like she was drowning. Finally, the crowd dispersed. She found Ronan in the armory, sharpening his blade with methodical precision. "You didn't have to come," he said without looking up. "Yes, I did." "Why?" "To explain how this is for the greater good? How you're sacrificing for the realm. To tell you I'm sorry." Now he looked at her. "For what? For not loving me back? That's not something you can control. For not seeing it sooner. For letting you stand beside me all these years without realizing—" "It's fine, Vela." But his hands were white-knuckled on the blade. "You made your choice. I'll live with it. Will you? What else am I going to do? Leave? Abandon everything I've built here because you're marrying someone else?" He set down the blade. "I'm your beta. Your second. That doesn't change. Ronan, I mean it. Whatever I feel, whatever I wanted, none of that matters compared to keeping you safe. So I'll stand beside you at the wedding. I'll serve this joint rule. I'll do whatever needs doing, because that's who I am." The words should have been comforting. Instead, they felt like a knife twisting. "I don't want to lose you," she said quietly. "You won't. I'll always be here." He picked up his blade again, resumed sharpening. "Even if I'm standing beside someone who doesn't want me the way I want her." She left him there, surrounded by weapons and shattered hope, and felt something break inside her chest. The month passed in a blur of preparation. Treaties were drafted, supplies redistributed, soldiers restationed. Darian's forces began arriving in groups, disciplined, well-armed, loyal to their king. The integration wasn't smooth. There were fights, territorial disputes, clashes of command structure. Vela spent hours mediating conflicts, establishing protocols, making it clear that any soldier, northern or frontier, who caused problems would answer to her personally. Darian was everywhere, working alongside her, backing her authority, proving he meant what he'd said about partnership. Slowly, grudgingly, the two forces began to function as one, but the tension with Ronan only got worse. He was professional, efficient, perfect in his duties, but the warmth was gone. The easy camaraderie they'd shared for years had been replaced by cold competence. He followed orders, offered tactical advice, coordinated patrols, all without ever looking her in the eye. It hurt more than she'd expected. 3 weeks after the announcement, a messenger arrived with urgent news. "The Riverlords are massing forces on the southern border," he reported. 10,000 soldiers, maybe more. The council erupted. 10,000 was an invasion force, not a raiding party. "They're testing us," Darian said, "seeing if the alliance is real or just political theater." "Then we show them it's real," Vela said. "Deploy combined forces, half mine, half yours. Hit them before they're fully assembled." That's aggressive. That's necessary. If we let them mass unchallenged, we look weak. But if we strike first, we might start a war we can't finish, Counselor Marsh interrupted. 10,000 soldiers, Your Majesty. Even combined, we're outnumbered. Then we don't fight them directly. We cut their supply lines, harass their flanks, make the campaign too costly to maintain. Darian nodded slowly. A war of attrition. Exactly. They spent the next hour planning. For the first time, they worked in perfect sync. Her knowledge of the terrain, his strategic experience, both of them building on each other's ideas until they had a plan that might actually work. Ronan stood silent through the entire discussion. After the council dispersed, Vela found him in the stables. You didn't say anything in there, she said. You had it handled. I wanted your input. Why? You and your future husband seem to have everything figured out. He didn't look at her, just kept checking his horse's hooves. Ronan, please, don't do this. Do what? My job? That's all I'm doing, Vela. Following orders, being the good beta. You're being an ass. Maybe. He straightened. Or maybe I'm just tired of watching you build a life with someone else while pretending everything's fine. Nothing about this is fine. You think I wanted any of this? I'm marrying a man I barely know to save lives. That's not a fairy tale, Ronan. That's survival. And what about us? What about 7 years of fighting beside each other? Does that not count? Of course it counts. You're one of the most important people in my life. Just not important enough. The words hung between them. That's not fair, she said quietly. No, it's not. But it's true. He walked past her toward the keep. Don't worry, Vela. I'll be at the wedding. I'll even smile for the ceremony. But don't expect me to celebrate losing you. He left her standing in the stables, horses shifting restlessly, and she realized with creeping horror that she'd just destroyed the one relationship that had kept her sane for 7 years. All for a political marriage to a man who admitted he didn't love her. The wedding was 5 days away, and Vela had never felt more alone. The attack came 2 days before the wedding. Viela was inspecting the northern watchtower when the alarm bells started ringing. She ran to the parapet, looked down at chaos unfolding in the valley below. River Lord soldiers pouring through a gap in the eastern defenses like water through a cracked dam. How many? She shouted to the watch commander. At least 500. They came through the forest route. The forest route. The one she'd reinforced 3 weeks ago after pulling forces from the eastern pass. The one that should have been impossible to breach without alerting the scouts. Unless someone had told them exactly where to strike. Her blood went cold. Sound the assembly. Get every available soldier to the eastern courtyard. Now! She was already moving, taking the tower steps 3 at a time. Ronan met her halfway down. I heard. I'm mobilizing the 2nd Battalion. No, you're coming with me. She grabbed his arm. How did they know about the forest route? What? That route was classified. Only senior command knew we'd weakened it to reinforce the south. So how did 500 enemy soldiers walk straight through our defenses without triggering a single alarm? His face went pale. You think we have a traitor. I know we do. She pushed past him, running toward the Great Hall. And we're going to find out who before more people die. The battle was brutal and short. Darian's forces hit the River Lord soldiers from the rear, while Vela's troops held the line at the gate. They drove the attackers back within an hour, but the damage was done. 30 soldiers dead, twice that wounded, and a massive hole in their defenses that would take weeks to repair. Vela stood in the blood-soaked courtyard afterward, watching medics tend to the wounded, and felt rage building in her chest like pressure behind a dam. Someone had betrayed them. Someone in her inner circle had given the enemy tactical information. She called an emergency council meeting. Every senior officer, every counselor, everyone who had access to classified information. They assembled in the war room, tension thick enough to cut. We were betrayed, Vela said, without preamble. The River Lords knew exactly where to strike. They had our patrol schedules, our weak points, maybe even our troop numbers. Someone in this room gave them that information. Silence. Shock on some faces, calculation on others. That's a serious accusation, Counselor Marsh said carefully. It's a fact. The question is who? Could have been anyone, another counselor offered. A servant who overheard conversations, a soldier with divided loyalties. It wasn't anyone random. Darian's voice cut through the speculation. The information they had was too specific. They knew about the forest route reinforcement, which was discussed in closed council 3 weeks ago. Only people in this room knew about it. Eyes shifted nervously around the table. Accusations unspoken, but heavy in the air. We need to investigate everyone, Chato Ronan said. Check communications, watch movements, find out who's been in contact with. Or we could just ask him directly, Vela said, looking straight at Counselor Wren. Wren went white. Your Majesty, You've been meeting with River Lord merchants for months. Don't deny it. I have 3 separate reports placing you at the Northern Tavern with known agents. She stood, walked around the table toward him. You've also been the loudest voice pushing me to avoid conflict, to negotiate instead of fight. Every time I proposed aggressive action, you argued for restraint. That's not treason, it's counsel. It's positioning. She stopped directly in front of him. You wanted me weak, wanted me to look incompetent so the council would lose faith. And when that didn't work fast enough, you sold our defenses to speed things along. I would never— Guards. 2 soldiers moved forward. Search his chambers. I want every document, every letter, every scrap of paper. Now. They dragged Wren from the room, his protests fading down the corridor. The remaining council members looked sick. Anyone else want to confess? Vela asked coldly. Or should I start investigating all of you? No one spoke. Good. Get out. All of you except Darian and Ronan. They fled. The door closed, leaving the 3 of them alone. That was a gamble, Darian said. What if you're wrong about Wren? I'm not wrong. I've suspected him for weeks. Today just confirmed it. And if the search doesn't find evidence, it will. She leaned against the table, suddenly exhausted. He's been too careful to be innocent. Ronan moved to the window, arms crossed. Even if Wren is guilty, there could be others. This kind of betrayal doesn't usually happen alone. I know. Vela rubbed her face. Which means I can't trust anyone right now. Not the council, not the soldiers, maybe not even— She stopped, looked at Ronan's back, saw the tension in his shoulders. Say it, Ronan said without turning around. You're wondering if you can trust me. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. It's what I'd be thinking if I were you. He turned to face her. I've been distant, angry. I have access to all the same information Wren had, and I've made no secret of the fact that I hate this marriage. So go ahead, Vela. Ask me if I'm the traitor. Ronan, ask me. The room fell silent. Darian watched them both with careful eyes. Did you betray us? Vela asked quietly. No. Can you prove it? Can anyone prove a negative? He spread his hands. I can tell you I would never endanger your life or your people. I can tell you that despite everything, my loyalty to you hasn't wavered. But if you don't believe me, there's nothing I can do about it. She wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly it hurt. But 7 years of ruling had taught her that wanting something didn't make it true. I believe you, she said finally, but I need you to prove it. Help me root out whoever else might be working with Wren. Show me I'm right to trust you. Something flickered across his face. Relief? Pain? Hard to tell. I will, he said. Whatever you need. He left before she could respond. Darian waited until the door closed. You're making a mistake. Which one? Trusting him. A man who's in love with you and losing you to someone else? That's motive for all kinds of poor decisions. Ronan wouldn't— You don't know what he'd do. None of us know what we're capable of when we're desperate. He moved closer. I'm not saying he's guilty. I'm saying you need to be careful. Because if he is, and you've given him access to our plans, this wedding might not happen. Are you actually concerned about me or just about losing a strategic alliance? Both. His honesty was brutal. But mostly you, because an alliance doesn't mean much if the queen is dead. The bluntness should have offended her. Instead, it was almost refreshing. No pretty words, no false comfort, just reality. The wedding is still happening, she said. Traitors or no traitors. We show strength, not fear. Even if it makes you a target? Especially then. He studied her face. You're either very brave or very stupid. I've been told both. She straightened. Double the guard at all entrances. background checks on everyone serving at the ceremony, and I want our best fighters positioned throughout the hall. If someone's going to try something, I want to be ready. And if they try something before the wedding, then we deal with it. She walked toward the door, paused with her hand on the handle. Darian, thank you for having my back today. That's what partners do. He said it simply, like it was obvious. Get used to it. The search of Wren's chambers turned up exactly what Vela expected. Coded letters, marked maps, a schedule of patrol rotations. He'd been passing information to the River Lords for at least 6 months, maybe longer. She had him executed at dawn. No trial, no lengthy interrogation. Just a quick execution in the courtyard with the entire garrison watching. She needed to send a message. Betrayal would be met with swift, absolute consequences. She watched him die and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no remorse, just cold calculation. Darian stood beside her throughout. Ronan stayed in the shadows at the back, face unreadable. Afterward, people avoided her eyes. She'd seen that look before, fear mixed with respect. The look people gave to someone who'd proven they'd do whatever was necessary. She hated it, but she wore it like armor anyway. The day before the wedding, everything fell apart. Vela was in her chambers, trying to sleep and failing, when Ronan burst through the door without knocking. We have a problem. She sat up. What kind of problem? The kind where River Lord forces just surrounded the keep. 20,000 soldiers, maybe more. His face was grim. They're demanding your surrender. Ice flooded her veins. 20,000? How is that even possible? Our scouts would have seen. They didn't come by the main roads. They used the mountain passes, moved at night, coordinated with multiple battalions. He crossed to the window. Someone gave them detailed information about our surveillance patterns. Wren. Probably, but it doesn't matter now. They're here, and we're outnumbered 4-1. She threw off the blankets, started pulling on her armor. Mobilize everyone, every soldier, every able-bodied civilian who can hold a weapon. Fortify the gates, prepare for siege. Vela. Ronan's voice stopped her. We can't win this. We don't have to win. We just have to hold long enough for reinforcements. What reinforcements? Darian's forces are here. Your forces are here. There's no one else coming. She wanted to argue, wanted to come up with a strategy, a plan, something that would turn the tide. But he was right. They were trapped. So what do we do? She asked quietly. They're offering terms. Surrender yourself and they'll spare the keep and everyone in it. Refuse, and they storm the walls. Surrender myself, she laughed bitterly. You mean let them execute me as a traitor and take control of my territory? Yes. Not happening. Then thousands of people die. The words hit like fists. She sank down onto the edge of the bed, armor half fastened, and tried to think through the fog of exhaustion and fear. There has to be another way, she said. If there is, I don't see it. A knock at the door. Darian walked in, fully armed, expression dark. I just heard. We need to evacuate you immediately. Evacuate where? They have the keep surrounded. The northern tunnel. It's not on any maps. Your father had it built as an emergency escape route. We can get you out, get you to safety. And leave everyone here to die? No. Vela, I said no. She stood, finished fastening her armor. I'm not running. I'm not surrendering. And I'm not letting these people suffer for my decisions. Then what's your plan? Darian's voice was sharp. Fight 20,000 soldiers with 5,000? That's not bravery, it's suicide. Maybe, but it's my choice to make. Not anymore. He moved closer, voice dropping. We're supposed to be partners. That means you don't get to throw your life away on a grand gesture. We find another solution. What solution? You heard Ronan. We're trapped. Then we negotiate, buy time, find leverage. They don't want negotiation. They want my head on a pike. So we give them something else. Darian turned to Ronan. The tunnel. How many people can it move at once? Maybe 50? It's narrow, unstable in places, but functional? For now. Then here's what we do. Darian pulled out a map, spread it across the bed. We evacuate civilians through the tunnel in waves. Women, children, elderly first. Meanwhile, we hold the walls, make it look like we're preparing for a long siege. They won't storm immediately. Sieges are costly, and they'll want to starve us out first. That gives us time. Time for what? Vela asked. To get you out. To regroup. To... No. Her voice was flat. I'm not leaving. Vela. I said no, Darian. This is my land, my people. I don't run. Even if staying means dying? Even then. They stared at each other, the tension crackling. Ronan cleared his throat. There might be another option. Both of them turned to look at him. The pact, Ronan said slowly. The marriage pact. It includes a military alliance clause, right? If either party is attacked, the other is bound to respond with full force. Yes, Darian said. But we're already here. My forces are already committed. But your allies aren't. Ronan traced a line on the map. You have treaties with 3 northern kingdoms. If Vela becomes your wife before the River Lords attack, those treaties extend to her territory. Your allies would be obligated to respond. Vela's mind raced. The wedding isn't until tomorrow. So we move it up. Tonight. Right now. Ronan looked at her. You marry Darian immediately. Invoke the alliance clause. Send ravens to his allies. It won't save us tonight, but it might make the River Lords think twice about a prolonged siege. And if we can hold out for 3 days, reinforcements could arrive. It was insane. It was desperate. It might actually work. That's... Darian started, then stopped. That's not the worst plan I've ever heard. Vela looked between them. You're serious? You want me to get married right now, in the middle of a siege, surrounded by 20,000 enemy soldiers? Yes, Ronan said simply. And you're okay with this? She looked at Darian. Getting married because it's tactically convenient? I came here to marry you anyway. The timing's just changed. He held her gaze. But you need to be sure, Vela. Once we do this, there's no going back. You'll be bound to me, to my allies, to the northern kingdoms. Your independence, the thing you fought for all these years, it's over. She thought about 7 years of standing alone, of making every decision, carrying every burden, answering to no one. She'd built her entire identity on being unbreakable, unmovable, needing nothing from anyone. And now she had to choose, pride or survival. Do it, she said. Get the priest. We're getting married. Well, the ceremony took 15 minutes. No guests, no celebration, no anything except the 3 of them and a terrified priest in the chapel, while enemy soldiers gathered outside the walls. The priest rushed through the words, hands shaking. Vela barely heard them. She was too busy running scenarios in her head, calculating odds, preparing for every possible outcome. Do you, Vela Thorn, take this man? Yes. And do you, Darian Yes? Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you married? Great. We need to move. Vela was already walking toward the door. Ronan, send ravens to all of Darian's allies, priority flight, emergency protocols. Darian, I need you to coordinate the wall defenses. I'll handle the evacuation through... Vela, Darian's voice stopped her. Wait. She turned. He crossed to her, took her hand, slipped a ring onto her finger. Heavy gold, simple design, warm from his pocket. I know this isn't how you wanted it, he said quietly, but it's real anyway. The alliance, the partnership, all of it. I'm with you now, for better or worse. Something in her chest cracked. Just a little. Just enough to let in a sliver of warmth. For better or worse, she repeated. He kissed her, quick, hard, more promise than passion. Then they were moving again, running through corridors, shouting orders, preparing for battle, married less than 5 minutes and already fighting for their lives. It would have been funny if it wasn't so terrifying. The River Lords attacked at dawn. Not a full assault, just probing strikes, testing the defenses, trying to find weak points. Vela stood on the battlements, watching ladders go up and come down, watching her soldiers hold the line, watching people die defending walls that might not matter in another few hours. Darian fought beside her, his sword a blur of steel and blood. He moved like violence incarnate, every strike precise and lethal. She found herself fighting in sync with him. He'd take the high strikes, she'd take the low. He'd push forward, she'd cover his flank. They'd never trained together, never planned combinations, but somehow they just worked. It should have felt strange. Instead, it felt inevitable. Left, she shouted. He spun, blocked a strike that would have taken his head off. She drove her blade through the attacker's guard, pulled back, moved to the next threat. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it finally broke, both sides pulled back to regroup. The walls held, but barely. Vela collapsed against the parapet, breathing hard, blood on her armor, most of it not hers. Darian leaned beside her, equally exhausted. They'll come again tonight, he said. Harder this time. I know. Can we hold? I don't know. Honesty, raw and brutal. She was too tired to lie. He took her hand, squeezed once. Then we'll find out together. Ronan found her an hour later in the war room, staring at maps like they might reveal some hidden solution. The Ravens got through, he said. Your husband's allies received the messages. They're mobilizing. How long? 5 days. Maybe 4 if they push hard. We don't have 4 days. I know. He moved to stand beside her, looked down at the maps. Vela, there's something I need to tell you. Something in his voice made her look up. What? The tunnel, the escape route. He swallowed hard. I sabotaged it. The world stopped. What? 2 days ago, after you announced you were definitely marrying him, I collapsed part of the passage, made it look like natural deterioration. I thought he couldn't meet her eyes. I thought if the tunnel was blocked, if evacuation wasn't an option, you'd have to stay, you'd have to fight. And maybe you'd realize you didn't need him, that you could do this alone like you always have. Horror crept through her veins like ice water. Ronan, we're using that tunnel to evacuate civilians. I know. I'm fixing it. I've had people working on it all day, clearing the rubble. How long? Another day. Maybe less. We don't have a day. Her voice was deadly quiet. There are 200 people down there right now, waiting to evacuate through a tunnel you deliberately destroyed. Children, Ronan. Elderly. People who can't fight. I'm fixing it. You sabotaged our only escape route because you were jealous. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. You put innocent lives at risk because you couldn't handle me marrying someone else. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? She was shouting now, fury replacing shock. Explain to me how this was anything except selfish, destructive betrayal. I love you. The words burst out of him. I've loved you for 7 years, and I've watched you push everyone away, refuse every offer of help, build walls so high no one could reach you. And then he shows up, some northern king with an army and a contract, and suddenly you're willing to compromise, willing to share power? You'd give him what you never gave me? Because he's not asking me to be less than I am. He's not trying to protect me, or control me, or make me into something I'm not. He's offering partnership, Ronan. Equality. Can you say the same? Silence. Thick and suffocating. I wanted to stand beside you, Ronan said finally, voice breaking. That's all I ever wanted. No, you wanted me to need you. There's a difference. She turned away from him. Get out. Vela, I said get out. Fix the tunnel, then stay away from me. We'll deal with your betrayal after the siege, if we survive. Please, get out. He left. The door closed. Viola stood alone in the war room, shaking with rage and grief and exhaustion, and felt the last piece of her old life crumble to dust. Ronan, loyal, steady Ronan, had sabotaged them, had put lives at risk because he couldn't handle losing her. She'd trusted him completely, and he'd broken that trust for the most human, most pathetic reason. He'd wanted her to need him. The door opened. Darian walked in, took one look at her face, and crossed the room in 3 strides. What happened? She told him. Everything. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, his expression was carved from stone. He sabotaged the tunnel. Yes. Put civilians at risk. Yes. Because he's in love with you. Apparently. Darian was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'm going to kill him. No, you're not. Why not? He's a traitor. He's not a traitor. He's an idiot. There's a difference. She sank into a chair. He made a stupid, selfish decision, but he's fixing it, and we need every fighter we have. So no, you're not killing him. Not yet, anyway. You're being too generous. No, I'm being practical. She looked up at him. I'll deal with Ronan later. Right now we have bigger problems. As if on cue, the alarm bells started ringing. They ran to the battlements, looked down at the valley below. The River Lord army was moving, not attacking, repositioning, forming up for something big. That's a full assault formation, Darian said grimly. They're going to hit us with everything they have. When? Tonight, maybe sooner. Vela watched the enemy forces maneuver, watched siege equipment being assembled, watched her death approaching with the inevitability of a winter storm. We can't hold, she said quietly. Not against that. No. He took her hand. We can't. So what do we do? He looked at her. Really looked at her. We go down fighting, together. It wasn't comfort, wasn't hope, just reality, spoken plainly. She squeezed his hand back. Together. They stood on the battlements, newly married and probably about to die, watching 20,000 soldiers prepare to destroy everything they'd built. And somewhere deep in the keep, in a collapsed tunnel, 200 civilians waited for rescue that might never come. Vela closed her eyes, took a breath, opened them again. Get everyone to defensive positions, she said. If this is our last stand, let's make it one they remember. The River Lords attacked at sunset, when the light turned everything blood red and shadows grew long enough to hide an army. Vela stood on the wall, sword in hand, watching the first wave hit their gates like a battering ram made of flesh and steel. The impact shook stone. Soldiers screamed. The smell of burning oil and blood filled the air. Archers, she shouted, concentrate fire on the siege towers. Arrows darkened the sky. Some found their marks. Most didn't. The towers kept coming, massive wooden structures tall enough to breach the walls, filled with soldiers ready to pour onto the battlements. Darian fought 3 positions down from her, cutting through anyone who made it over the walls. His movements were economical now, no wasted motion, just killing, efficient, and relentless. A ladder slammed against the wall beside Vela. She grabbed a pot of boiling oil, poured it down. Screams erupted below. The ladder fell away. Another one took its place immediately. They were everywhere, too many, too fast. We can't hold the outer wall, someone shouted. We hold until we can't. Vela drove her blade through an enemy soldier's throat, kicked him back over the edge. No one retreats without my order. But retreat was coming. She could feel it in the way her soldiers moved, desperation replacing discipline. They were outnumbered, outmatched, running on nothing but stubborn refusal to die. It wouldn't be enough. A horn blew from the eastern tower. 3 short blasts. The signal for catastrophic breach. Vela's stomach dropped. She looked toward the sound, saw Riverlord soldiers pouring through a gap in the wall where a section had collapsed under siege fire. Fall back to the inner courtyard, Darian's voice cut through the chaos. Controlled retreat, now! Her soldiers started pulling back, fighting as they went. Viola stayed on the wall, covering their retreat, buying seconds with blood. An enemy soldier came at her from the left. She blocked, countered, opened his throat. Another from the right. She spun, took his legs out, finished him on the ground. Too many. There were just too many. Vela! Darian was beside her suddenly, grabbing her arm. We need to move. Not yet. Now! He physically pulled her away from the wall as a section of parapet exploded under a boulder from their siege weapons. They ran. The inner courtyard was a nightmare of confused fighting, defenders trying to form new lines while attackers poured through breaches. Somewhere in the chaos, civilians were still trapped in the tunnels, waiting for rescue that hadn't come. Vela's mind raced. They couldn't hold. The walls were lost. The keep would be next. And then an explosion rocked the eastern wall. Not siege weapons, something else, bigger. Everyone stopped fighting for a moment, looking toward the sound. Another explosion. Then another. Vela ran to the eastern parapet, looked out at the valley. Fire. Massive columns of fire erupting from the rear of the Riverlord forces. Not siege fire. This was coming from outside, hitting supply lines and command tents. What the hell? Darian appeared beside her. Then she saw them. Riders. Hundreds of them, pouring down from the northern mountain passes with torches and blades, hitting the Riverlords from behind, northern banners, Darian's allies. They're early, she breathed. Your ravens said 5 days. They must have been closer than we thought. Darian's voice held barely restrained hope. Or they rode like hell. The Riverlord army was fracturing. Caught between defenders on the walls and attackers at their rear, their formation collapsed into chaos. Commanders shouted conflicting orders. Soldiers broke ranks, some trying to fight the new threat, others still committed to the siege. Vela saw the moment their commander made the decision, saw him signal retreat, saw the disciplined withdrawal begin even as fighting continued. They're pulling back, she said, not fast enough. Darian turned to his nearest officer. Open the gates, we're going after them. What? The officer looked shocked. Sir, we're exhausted. We can barely... Open the gates. They're vulnerable right now. We hit them while they're retreating. We can break them completely. It was insane. They'd been on the verge of defeat minutes ago, and now Darian wanted to chase a retreating army? Do it, Vela said. The gates opened. What was left of their forces poured out, broken, bleeding, but not beaten. They hit the Riverlord rearguard like a hammer, driving them back toward the newcomers. Viola fought in the vanguard, Darian at her side. Everything was blood and screaming and the sick crunch of steel meeting flesh. She lost track of time, lost track of everything except the next strike, the next kill, the next breath. When it finally ended, the sun was gone. Torches lit a battlefield covered in bodies. The Riverlord forces had scattered, their siege broken, their army in full retreat. Viola stood in the middle of the carnage, breathing hard, trying to process what had just happened. They'd survived. Against all odds, against impossible numbers, they'd actually survived. Your Majesty. A rider approached, bearing northern colors. He was young, barely out of boyhood, but he sat his horse like a veteran. King Halford sends his regards. He received your raven and rode immediately. Arrived just in time, it seems. Apparently, her voice came out rough. Thank him for us. His timing was impeccable. The boy grinned. He said to tell you that anyone who marries Darian Vare must be either very brave or very desperate, and either way deserves support. Despite everything, Vela almost smiled. I'll accept that assessment. More riders were arriving, more northern forces, thousands of them, fresh and ready, surrounding the keep in a protective perimeter. They were safe. Actually, safe. Darian appeared through the crowd, covered in blood, limping slightly, but alive. He looked at her, and something passed between them. Relief, recognition, the shared knowledge that they'd come within inches of death and survived together. Well, he said, that was exciting. She laughed, actually laughed, the sound bordering on hysteria. That's one word for it. He moved closer, pulled her into a brief, hard embrace. She felt him shaking, or maybe that was her. Hard to tell. We're alive, he murmured against her hair. I honestly didn't think we'd be. Neither did I. She pulled back, looked up at him. Your allies came through. Because you married me, because you took the risk. His hand came up, cupped her jaw. You saved us, Vela. Your decision, your courage. Don't forget that. She wanted to argue, wanted to point out it was luck and timing and a dozen other factors. But maybe he was right. Maybe choosing partnership over pride had been the thing that saved them. The thought was both terrifying and liberating. The keep was a disaster. Walls breached, buildings burned, bodies everywhere. The cleanup would take weeks. The rebuilding, months. But they were alive to do it. Vela walked through the courtyard as dawn broke, assessing damage, checking on wounded, trying to wrap her mind around everything that had happened. She'd been awake for 30 hours straight. Exhaustion pulled at her bones. She found Ronan in the tunnels, covered in dust and sweat, helping pull the last civilians to safety. The passage was finally clear. He'd worked through the entire siege to fix what he'd broken. He saw her coming and went still. Everyone's out, he said quietly. 212 people. All alive. Good. Silence stretched between them. I'm sorry, he finally said. For what I did, for risking them because I was jealous, selfish, stupid. She crossed her arms. Yes, you were all of those things. I know. You could have killed them, children, Ronan. Elderly people who trusted us to protect them. I know. His voice cracked. I've spent the last 18 hours thinking about what could have happened, what I almost caused, and He looked at her with haunted eyes. I don't know how to fix this. You can't, not completely. She leaned against the tunnel wall. But you saved them. You worked through a battle to make sure they got out. That counts for something. Does it? I don't know yet. Honesty, brutal and cold. Ask me again after I've slept for 3 days and can think straight. He nodded, started to walk past her. Ronan, he stopped. What you did was unforgivable, but you've been my friend for 7 years. That doesn't just disappear, so I'm going to give you a choice. Leave now, start over somewhere else, and I'll give you a clean recommendation. Or stay. Accept whatever consequences I decide and earn back the trust you destroyed. Your call. He turned to look at her. If I stay, will things ever be like they were? No, they won't. That's gone. The words hurt to say, but they were true. But maybe we can build something different, something honest, if you're willing to put in the work. I am. No hesitation. Whatever it takes. Then start by remembering you're my beta, not my keeper, not my protector, not someone who makes decisions about what I need. You stand beside me. That's all. Can you do that? Yes. He swallowed hard. I can do that. Good. Now get some sleep. We have a lot of rebuilding to do. He left. Vela stood alone in the tunnel, feeling the weight of 7 years shift and settle into a new configuration. Nothing would be the same. But maybe that was all right. Maybe change was the only way to survive. She found Darian 3 hours later in the war room, surrounded by maps and dispatches. He looked up when she entered. You should be sleeping, he said. So should you. Can't. Too much to organize. The northern forces need supplies. The wall needs immediate reinforcement. We have 200 wounded who need care. Darian. She crossed to him, physically removed the papers from his hands. It can wait 3 hours. Can it? Yes, because if you collapse from exhaustion, I'm the one who has to run everything alone. And I just spent 7 years doing that. I'd rather not start again. He smiled slightly. Fair point. She pulled up a chair, sat down heavily. For a moment, neither spoke. I talked to Ronan, she finally said. And? He's staying, on probation. Darian's jaw tightened. You're giving him another chance. I'm giving him the opportunity to earn one. There's a difference. He sabotaged us, Vela. Put lives at risk because he couldn't handle his feelings. I know, and I'm not forgetting that. But he also spent 18 hours clearing rubble during a siege to save those people. That has to count for something. She looked at him. You wanted to kill him yesterday. I still do, a little. But you won't. No, because you asked me not to. Because we're partners, and partners respect each other's decisions even when they disagree. He leaned back. But if he does anything like that again, he won't get the chance. I've made it very clear what his role is now, and what it isn't. Darian studied her face. Are you okay with how things ended between you two? No, but I will be. She ran a hand through her hair. I lost my oldest friend yesterday, or changed him into something else. Either way, it hurts. But it was necessary. Necessary things usually do hurt. Yeah, she met his eyes. Speaking of necessary things, we're married. We are. In the middle of a siege. Terrible timing. The worst. Despite everything, she felt her mouth twitch. We didn't even have a proper kiss. We were a little busy trying not to die. Fair point. He stood, crossed to where she sat, held out his hand. We could fix that now, if you want. She looked at his hand, took it, let him pull her to her feet. This is still a political alliance, she said. We both know that. I know. We're partners, equals, nothing more. Right. So kissing would just be sealing the deal, officially. Absolutely. Very official. They were close enough that she could feel his warmth, smell smoke and leather and blood. Close enough that her heart rate kicked up despite exhaustion. I'm terrible at this, she admitted. The relationship part. I don't know how to be married. Neither do I. His hand came up, fingers brushing her jaw. We'll figure it out together. What if we can't? Then we fail. But at least we fail while trying. He echoed his earlier words, but now they carried weight earned through shared survival. She kissed him. It was different from the rushed ceremony kiss. This was deliberate, searching, two people trying to figure out if there was something real beneath the politics and strategy. His arms came around her. She let herself lean into him, let herself feel the solid strength of someone who'd fought beside her, bled beside her, proved he was more than promises and contracts. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "Well," Darian said, "that was—" "Shut up." She kissed him again. This time it was hungrier, more urgent. 7 years of standing alone, of refusing connection, of pretending she didn't want anything except survival, all of it cracked open like an egg. She'd spent so long being the Thorn Queen, untouchable and cold, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to be human, to want, to let someone touch her without armor between them. They ended up against the wall, his hands in her hair, her fingers digging into his shoulders hard enough to bruise. When they finally stopped for air, she was shaking. "Vela." His voice was rough. "If this is just adrenaline, it's not." She met his eyes. "Or maybe it is. I don't know. But I know I want this. Want you. Is that enough?" "For now, yes. And later?" "Later we figure out what this is, if it's just survival instinct or something more. But right now," he kissed her again, softer this time. "Right now we're alive and married, and we just saved a kingdom. That's enough." She pulled back, studied his face. "I still don't love you." "I know." "And you don't love me." "No. But maybe—" She hesitated. "Maybe we could get there, eventually, if we tried." "Maybe." He smiled. "You willing to try?" Was she? After 7 years of keeping everyone at arm's length? After building walls so high even her closest friend couldn't reach her? "Yeah," she said. "I think I am." But the next week was chaos. Northern forces integrated with her remaining soldiers. Command structures were reorganized. Treaties were drafted, signed, sealed. Supplies were redistributed. The wounded were tended. The dead were buried. And through it all, Vela and Darian worked side by side. He was right about partnership. It made everything harder in some ways. More voices, more opinions, more compromise. But it also made things possible that would have been impossible alone. When the Eastern Kingdoms sent ambassadors demanding tribute, they faced 2 monarchs instead of 1. When supply routes needed renegotiating, they had twice the leverage. When the River Lords sent peace envoys, carefully worded apologies and offers of non-aggression, they presented a united front. The Thorn Queen and the Winter Wolf, separately dangerous. Together, unstoppable. 3 weeks after the siege, a raven arrived from the High Council, the loose coalition of regional powers that nominally governed disputes between kingdoms. Vela read the message twice, then handed it to Darian. "They want a formal hearing," he said, "about the marriage pact, the joint rule, the military actions against the River Lords. They think we've grown too powerful." "We have." He set down the message. "The question is what we do about it. We go to the hearing, we explain our position, we show them we're not a threat to the balance of power. Unless we want to be." She looked at him sharply. "What?" "The High Council is weak, Vela. They haven't enforced a treaty in decades. They exist because no one kingdom is strong enough to challenge them. But together?" He gestured at the map. "Together we could reshape the entire region, set new rules, actually maintain peace instead of just mediating conflicts. That's conquest. That's leadership." He moved to the map, traced boundaries with one finger. "The River Lords attacked you because they thought you were weak. The Eastern Kingdoms tried to absorb your territory because no one stopped them. How many other small realms are getting crushed because there's no real authority? So we become that authority? We could, if we wanted." Vela stared at the map, at territories and kingdoms and the spaces between them. She'd spent 7 years defending one small frontier, had never thought bigger than survival, but maybe survival wasn't enough anymore. "That's a conversation for later," she said carefully. "First we deal with the High Council, convince them we're not a threat. Even though we are. Especially because we are." He smiled. "You're learning." Learning what? How to play the game. Real power isn't about being the strongest. It's about making everyone else think you're reasonable, right up until the moment you're not. She should have been disturbed by that logic. Instead, she found it oddly comforting. She'd spent 7 years being honest, brutally, transparently honest about her capabilities and limitations, and it had nearly gotten her killed. Maybe it was time to learn a different approach. Bad. The night before they were set to leave for the High Council hearing, Ronan requested a private meeting. Bela granted it. They met in the same war room where she'd learned about his betrayal, tension thick enough to choke on. "I want to come with you," he said without preamble. "To the hearing." "Why?" "Because I'm still your beta. Because you might need someone who knows your history, your thinking. Because—" He stopped, started again. "Because I want to prove I can still be trusted." She studied him. He looked older than he had a month ago, worn down by guilt and exhaustion and the weight of his choices. "If you come, you follow my orders without question. You don't second-guess my decisions. You don't try to protect me from consequences. You don't insert yourself where you're not needed. Clear? Clear? And if I tell you to leave, if at any point I decide your presence is doing more harm than good, you go. No arguments." Understood. She wanted to refuse him, wanted to leave him behind, prove she didn't need him anymore. But that would be pride talking, and pride had nearly destroyed her. "Fine. You can come." She held up a hand when relief flooded his face. "But this is your last chance, Ronan. There won't be another one." "I know. Thank you." He left. Vela stood alone in the war room, surrounded by maps of territories she now controlled with her husband, and tried to figure out who she was becoming. Not the Thorn Queen who ruled alone. That woman was gone, broken apart by siege and betrayal and the simple truth that isolation wasn't strength. But not someone else's wife either. Not a figurehead or a partner who bent to keep the peace. Something new. Something between the extremes. A queen who could stand beside someone without losing herself. Who could accept help without surrendering control. Who could be both strong and vulnerable, both independent and connected. It was terrifying. It was necessary. It was, she realized, the only way forward. They left for the High Council at dawn, a combined force of northern and frontier soldiers forming an impressive escort. Vela rode beside Darian, Ronan a respectful distance behind them. The journey would take 5 days. 5 days to prepare their case, coordinate their strategy, present themselves as a unified force that somehow wasn't a threat. "They're going to try to separate us," Darian said as they rode. "Divide and conquer. They'll question you privately, suggest that I'm manipulating you, imply that you've lost your independence. And you need to be ready. Because you haven't lost your independence, but you have changed. You're not the same queen who refused all alliances. That's going to raise questions." "Let them question. I'll explain my reasoning." "Which is?" She thought about that. About 7 years of standing alone. About 200 soldiers dead because she'd been too proud to listen. About standing on the battlements watching her death approach and knowing pride couldn't save her. "Survival," she said finally. "I changed because the alternative was death. For me and everyone who depended on me. If that makes me weak in their eyes, they can think whatever they want." "Good." He looked satisfied. "That's honest. They'll respect honesty." "Will they?" "Some of them, the ones who matter." They rode in silence for a while. The landscape gradually shifted from harsh frontier to rolling hills, from survival to civilization. "What happens if they reject the joint rule?" she asked. "If they declare it invalid and demand we separate?" "Then we refuse." "And if they press?" He looked at her. "Then we show them what happens when two alphas work together instead of fighting. We remind them why it's better to negotiate with us than oppose us. And if that doesn't work, we go to war with the High Council." "Would that be so terrible?" His voice was mild, but his eyes were sharp. "They're weak, divided, held together by tradition more than power. We could take them apart in 6 months and replace them with what? Us? A dictatorship of two? A partnership of equals with enough strength to actually maintain peace." He shrugged. "Better than what exists now." Vela thought about that. About the High Council's failures, the endless border conflicts they refused to resolve, the way small kingdoms got crushed while they debated procedure. Maybe Darien was right. Maybe the region needed leadership willing to act instead of just mediate. But that was a dangerous path. The kind that started with good intentions and ended with tyranny. One thing at a time, she said. First we convince them we're not a threat, then we worry about whether we want to be. Fair enough. They rode on. Behind them, Ronan kept careful distance, neither too close nor too far. A reminder of what had been lost. A possibility of what might be rebuilt. Ahead, the High Council waited. And beyond that, the future. Unwritten, uncertain, full of possibilities both terrifying and exhilarating. Vela had spent 7 years knowing exactly who she was and what she wanted. Now everything was changing, and for the first time in her life, she thought maybe that was okay. The High Council chambers were designed to intimidate. Vaulted ceilings that swallowed sound. Stone walls carved with the names of every kingdom that had ever sworn allegiance. 7 thrones arranged in a semicircle, each occupied by a monarch or their representative, all looking down at whoever stood in the center of the room. Vela walked to that center point and refused to feel small. Darien stood beside her, not behind, not ahead, equal. The statement was deliberate. Queen Vela Thorn and King Darien Vaer. The High Counselor's voice echoed. He was old, gray-bearded, draped in ceremonial robes that probably cost more than her entire garrison's monthly pay. You stand accused of violating territorial sovereignty, engaging in unauthorized military action, and forming an alliance that threatens the balance of power in this region. We stand accused of surviving, Vela said. Her voice carried clearly despite the acoustics designed to muffle, by any means necessary. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The High Counselor's expression didn't change. The marriage pact between your houses was created without council approval, he continued. Joint rule requires ratification by this body. You have proceeded without that ratification. The pact was signed 7 years ago, Darien said, long before either of us sat these thrones. We simply honored an existing agreement. An agreement made under duress. All agreements during wartime are made under duress. Vela took a step forward. My father needed military support. King Darien's father provided it. 2,000 soldiers, 700 dead. That's not duress, that's payment, and the terms were clear, my hand in exchange for that support. You were 16 years old. I was, and now I'm 26 and making my own choices. The pact still stands. I honor it willingly. Another counselor spoke up, a woman with sharp eyes and sharper jewelry. The issue isn't the pact itself, Queen Vela. It's the consolidation of power. Your combined territories control the northern trade routes, the eastern mountain passes, and the southern agricultural valleys. That's more power than any single entity has held in 50 years. Single entity? Vela repeated. We're 2 separate monarchs with separate councils and separate administrations. Joint rule doesn't mean merged kingdoms. Doesn't it? The woman leaned forward. You deploy combined military forces. You negotiate trade agreements as a unit. You present yourselves as a unified front. How is that not a single entity? Because we can disagree, Vela said simply. Because we have separate authority. Because if King Darien makes a decision I oppose, I can veto it within my territory. And vice versa. That's partnership, not consolidation. Can you prove that? Give us an example of where you've disagreed. Vela glanced at Darien. They prepared for this question. The River Lords, Darien said. After the siege, they sent peace envoys. I wanted to press our advantage, strike while they were weak, take territory as compensation for the attack. Queen Vela disagreed. She argued for negotiated settlement, reparations, and non-aggression treaties instead of conquest. We compromised on a middle approach. And how did you decide who won that disagreement? The High Counselor asked. We both did, Vela said. He got stricter border enforcement and doubled reparations. I got peace treaty language that prevents future aggression. Neither of us got exactly what we wanted. That's compromise. More murmurs, some approving, some skeptical. A third counselor, younger, ambitious-looking, spoke up. You say you honor the marriage willingly now, but initially you refused, publicly, repeatedly. What changed? Trap question. Vela saw it immediately. Admit she was forced, and they'd invalidate the pact. Admit she changed her mind, and they'd question her stability. I grew up, she said. I spent 7 years thinking independence meant isolation, that accepting help was weakness. Then the River Lords attacked with 20,000 soldiers, and I realized I had a choice: maintain pride or save lives. I chose lives. If that makes me inconsistent, so be it. But I'm still here, and so are my people. I call that success. Success built on convenience, the ambitious counselor said. You married him because you needed his army. Now that the threat is past, what prevents you from dissolving this partnership? Nothing prevents us, Darian said, except that we don't want to, because this partnership works, because we're stronger together than separate, because, he looked at Vela, because we've built something neither of us expected, something worth keeping. The words hung in the air. Vela felt something shift in her chest, recognition of truth she'd been avoiding. He was right. This was more than strategy now, more than survival. She didn't know what to call it yet, but it was real. The High Counselor studied them both with ancient, calculating eyes. This council exists to prevent exactly what you represent, concentrated power that could destabilize the region. We've seen it before. Alliances that start as partnerships and end as empires. Then watch us, Vela said. Put restrictions in place if you must. Require annual reports on our military deployments. Mandate trade agreement transparency. Send observers to our councils. We'll accept reasonable oversight. But don't ask us to dissolve a partnership that saved thousands of lives because you're afraid of what we might become. Fear is often wise. So is trust. She held his gaze. You can either work with us, help us build something stable that benefits everyone, or you can oppose us and prove that this council cares more about control than peace. Your choice. The chamber went silent. The High Counselor exchanged glances with the other counselors. A long, waited pause. We will deliberate, he finally said. You'll have our decision by tomorrow. They were dismissed. Viola walked out of the chamber with her head high, Darian beside her, neither speaking until they were back in their quarters. Then she collapsed into a chair. That went well, Ronan said. He'd been waiting outside the chamber, standing guard. Or terribly, hard to tell with them. They'll approve it, Darian said. He poured wine, handed glasses to both of them. They have to. Rejecting the partnership means looking weak, and they can't afford that. Don't count on it. Vela drank deeply. The High Council has survived by being unpredictable. They might reject us just to prove they still have power. Then what? Then we deal with it. She set down her glass. But not tonight. Tonight we rest. Ronan cleared his throat. I'll take first watch. Make sure no one bothers you. He left before she could respond. The distance between them felt simultaneously necessary and painful. Darian watched him go. He's trying. I know. You going to forgive him eventually? I don't know. She stood, walked to the window. What he did was human. Stupid and selfish and absolutely human. Darian came to stand beside her. People make terrible choices when they're in pain. Doesn't excuse it, but it explains it. You wanted to kill him a month ago. I still might. But I understand wanting something so badly you sabotage yourself trying to get it. His hand found hers. I did that with you, pushed too hard, too fast, nearly drove you away because I couldn't accept that some things take time. She laced her fingers through his. And now? Now I'm learning patience, letting things develop naturally instead of forcing them. He turned her to face him. I meant what I said in there. This partnership, it's worth keeping. Not because of strategy or politics, because I don't want to go back to doing everything alone. Neither do I. The admission felt like stepping off a cliff. I don't love you yet. I need you to know that. I know, but I might. Eventually, if we keep, she gestured vaguely. This, he smiled. This. Very articulate, Your Majesty. Shut up. He kissed her instead, soft, searching, without the urgency of survival or the heat of adrenaline. Just two people trying to figure out what they were building. When they pulled apart, Vela rested her forehead against his chest. I'm terrified. Of what? That this will fail. That I'll lose myself trying to be someone's partner. That I'll wake up one day and realize I traded independence for comfort and can't get it back. Then we make sure that doesn't happen. His arms came around her. We set boundaries. We check in. We remember that partnership means two separate people choosing to work together, not one person absorbing the other. You make it sound simple. It's not, but it's possible. He pulled back to look at her. My parents had joint rule for 30 years. They fought constantly, disagreed on nearly everything, drove each other crazy. But they never stopped being individuals, never stopped challenging each other. That's what made it work. Your parents sound exhausting. They were, but they were happy, most of the time. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I want that. Do you? Did she? After 7 years of convinced that happiness was a luxury she couldn't afford? Yeah, she said quietly. I think I do. The High Council's decision came at noon the next day. Vela and Darian stood once again in the center of that cavernous chamber, waiting for judgment. This council has deliberated extensively, the High Counselor said. The marriage pact between House Thorn and House Veyre is legitimate. The joint rule is unorthodox, but not unprecedented. Therefore, we will ratify it under the following conditions. Vela's shoulders relaxed fractionally. First, annual reports on military deployments and alliance formations. Second, trade agreements must be submitted for council review. Third, any territorial expansion requires prior approval. And fourth, he paused, you will accept a council observer to be stationed permanently in your court, to ensure compliance. It was better than rejection, barely. We accept the first three conditions, Vela said, but we cannot accept a permanent observer. Our councils discuss classified military information, sensitive negotiations. Allowing an outsider access to that is the price of ratification, the High Counselor said. This is non-negotiable. Vela looked at Darian. They'd discussed this possibility, agreed on how to handle it. Then we reject ratification, Darian said calmly. The chamber erupted, counselors shouting, advisors whispering, the High Counselor raising his hands for silence. We reject being treated like children who need supervision, Vela cut in. We came here in good faith, willing to compromise. But you're not asking for oversight. You're asking for control. And we won't accept that. Then you leave us no choice but to declare your partnership invalid. Declare whatever you want. Darian's voice carried steel. We'll still be married. We'll still have joint rule. The only difference is we won't have your approval. And honestly, he looked around the chamber, I don't think we need it. You need council recognition for trade agreements for territorial integrity? We have our own trade agreements, our own territorial integrity, backed by combined forces that could defend against anyone in this region. Vela let that sink in. You're not our rulers. You're a mediating body that exists because individual kingdoms allow it. But if you can't mediate fairly, if you try to control instead of facilitate, then you're not serving any purpose except your own power. The High Counselor's face went red. Are you threatening this council? No, Vela said. We're stating facts. You can work with us or against us, but you can't control us, not anymore. Silence fell, heavy and absolute. Then the woman with the sharp eyes started laughing. Everyone turned to stare at her. She stood, walked down from her throne to the main floor, stopped in front of Vela and Darian. I am Queen Helena of the Coastal Kingdoms, she said, and I think I like you. The High Counselor looked scandalized. Queen Helena, this is highly irregular. Oh, everything about this is irregular, Marcus. That's what makes it interesting. She circled Vela and Darian like a predator assessing prey. You want to know what I think? I think they're right. This council has been weak for decades. We mediate, we discuss, we draft treaties that no one enforces. And meanwhile, kingdoms fall apart because we're too busy protecting our own interests. That's not... It is exactly true, and you know it. Helena stopped, looked at the assembled counselors. The River Lords attacked a sovereign kingdom with 20,000 soldiers. Did we respond? No. Did we even censure them? No. We sent a letter asking them to explain themselves. A letter. More murmurs, uncomfortable now. These two survived because they adapted. Because they built something new instead of clinging to something broken. Helena turned back to Vela and Darian. I'll support your ratification, without the observer requirement, on one condition. Which is, Vela asked carefully, that when this council inevitably crumbles, and it will, probably within the next 10 years, you remember who supported you, and you help build something better. It was a bold statement, borderline treasonous by council standards. It was also exactly what Vela had been thinking. We will, she said. Helena smiled. Good. Then I vote for ratification, with oversight conditions 1 through 3 only. Another counselor stood. I second that vote. Then another. I support the revised terms. The High Counselor looked around the chamber, watching his power slip away in real time. Finally, he sighed. Very well. The joint rule between House Thorn and House Veyre is ratified, with conditions 1 through 3. Dismissed. They were dismissed. Victorious. Vela didn't breathe fully until they were outside the building. That was, she started. Insane, Darian finished. Reckless, potentially the end of the High Council as we know it. I was going to say satisfying. He laughed. Actually laughed, loud and genuine. You're a dangerous woman, Vela Thorn. Vela Veyre, actually, legally, according to the ratification. Do you want to take my name? Do you want to take mine? They looked at each other. Keep both, they said simultaneously. It felt right. Neither absorbing the other, both maintaining identity while building something new. Come on, Darian said. Let's go home. Home. The words settled into her chest like a warm stone. Not her fortress, not his territory. Home. The place they'd built together through blood and compromise and sheer stubborn determination to survive. Yeah, she liked the sound of that. Ditch. They returned to the keep 3 weeks later to find it transformed. Walls rebuilt, stronger than before. Damaged buildings repaired. The courtyard that had been soaked in blood now clean, almost peaceful. The soldiers who'd survived the siege had integrated fully, northern and frontier forces training together, eating together, sharing stories. The animosity had faded into mutual respect. Vela walked through it all, taking inventory, barely believing this was real. They did good work, Ronan said. He'd been overseeing reconstruction while they were gone. Better than good, actually. The eastern wall is now the strongest point in the entire fortress. Thank you, Vela said, for managing this. It's my job. It's more than that. You could have left, could have taken my offer and started over somewhere else, but you stayed. He looked at her, really looked at her. I made a mistake, a terrible one, but I wasn't wrong about everything. You needed someone who knew you, who understood how you think, who could translate between your instincts and everyone else's expectations. I can still be that person, if you'll let me. Can you be that person without wanting more? I have to be. Because the alternative is losing you completely. His voice was steady. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for the chance to earn back trust, however long that takes. Vela thought about 7 years of partnership, about the person who'd stood beside her through everything until he couldn't anymore, about whether that history was worth salvaging. Okay, she said finally. We try. But it's different now. You understand that? I do. No more decisions made for my own good. No more sabotaging things because you disagree with my choices. You're my beta, Ronan. Not my protector. Not my conscience. Just my second. Can you live with that? Yes. No hesitation. I can live with that. She held out her hand. He took it. They shook, formal and final. It wasn't what it had been. Maybe it never would be. But it was something, a foundation to build on. That night, Vela stood on the battlements with Darian, looking out at the land they now shared. Queen Helena was right, she said. The High Council is dying, maybe already dead. What comes after? Whatever we build, Darian said. If we want to. Do you? Build a new system? Replace the council with something that actually works? He considered. Yeah, I think I do. But not alone, with partners. Multiple kingdoms working together, making decisions collectively instead of one body dictating terms. That's what the High Council was supposed to be. Then we do it better. Learn from their mistakes. Create something with actual accountability. Vela turned to face him. That's years of work, maybe decades, and it'll make us enemies. The council won't go down without a fight. I know. He pulled her close. But we've already done the impossible, survived a siege we shouldn't have, built a partnership that shouldn't work, changed each other in ways neither of us expected. What's reshaping regional politics compared to that? She laughed. You make it sound simple. It's not. But it's possible. If we try. Together. Together. She kissed him, long and slow, tasting possibility and promise and the strange, unexpected joy of having someone who saw her completely and chose to stay anyway. When they pulled apart, she saw Ronan on the far side of the courtyard. He was watching them, expression carefully neutral. But when he saw her looking, he nodded once. Acknowledgement without pain. Maybe they really could rebuild their friendship. Not what it was, but something honest. What are you thinking? Darian asked. That I spent 7 years convinced I had to be alone. That needing someone was weakness. That accepting help meant losing myself. She leaned against him. And I was wrong about all of it. Completely wrong? Maybe not completely. I needed to learn to stand alone before I could learn to stand with someone. But yeah, mostly wrong. He kissed the top of her head. For what it's worth, I think you're stronger now than you were then. How do you figure? Because now you know you can survive alone if you have to, but you're choosing not to. That takes more courage than isolation ever did. She thought about that. About the queen who'd needed no one. About what she'd given up to maintain that image. About everything she'd gained by letting it go. I might love you, she said quietly. I'm not sure yet, but I might. I might love you too. His arms tightened around her. Guess we'll find out together. They stood on the battlements as night fell, two rulers who'd changed each other, saved each other, built something neither had expected. The Thorn Queen and the Winter Wolf, separately dangerous, together unstoppable, and finally, no longer alone. 6 months later, Queen Helena sent a letter. Vela read it twice, then handed it to Darian. She wants to form a new coalition, he said, with us as founding members. A council of equals instead of a high council that pretends to be something it's not. What do you think? I think she's right. The old system is broken. Time to build something new. He looked at her. You ready for that fight? Vela thought about everything that had led here. About the queen who'd ruled alone for 7 years. About the marriage she'd refused, then accepted, then made real. About partnership and compromise and the terrifying, exhilarating work of building something bigger than herself. Yeah, she said. I'm ready. She took his hand. They walked together into the council chamber where Ronan and their combined advisors waited. Where maps and proposals and the future spread out before them. The Thorn Queen had learned that strength didn't mean standing alone. The Winter Wolf had found a partner who wouldn't break. And together, they would reshape their world. Not through conquest or force, but through the simple, radical act of choosing each other, every day, in every way that mattered. The pact that had brought them together was fulfilled. The marriage was real. The partnership was tested and proven. Now came the work of building something that would outlast them both. And Vela discovered she was no longer afraid, because she wasn't doing it alone anymore. And that, finally, impossibly, beautifully, was enough.